Hello and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and I'm so pleased to welcome Ciel Pierlot back onto the podcast, at this time to talk about her new book, Terms of Service.
Hi, everybody.
Nice to have you back.
Good to be back.
And cannot wait to talk about this book. Sarah and I got on an hour early to get most of our chaos out so we could actually ask you questions and not just scream the whole time.
There might still be a little bit of screaming, fair warning.
Screaming is always welcome.
Yeah.
I'm never going to say no to screaming.
So before we get into that, our quick introduction, what's something great that happened recently?
I finally moved to a new place. I was previously living somewhere where the ceiling was really sloped, so I could stand up in about 10% of my room. And now I'm in somewhere that has a normal ceiling where I can stand up in 100% of my room.
Congratulations.
So I'm very excited about that.
That's great. Moving is always the worst until you're done, and then it feels so good.
Oh, yeah. Once you've unpacked the final boxes and have a comfortable bed to sleep in, you're just like, oh, okay, cool. This is so much better.
Yeah.
But while you're doing it, it's a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sarah?
My good thing is that I was blessed once more by the pug distribution system. So I have accidentally acquired a third pug. Her name is Cookie. She is 8 months old, and she and Dumpling spend the entire day play fighting. That's all they do. I am so tired. Please send help.
But the thing is, if we add more Sarahs, then you'll need to add more pugs to even out the ratio, and then it's just like a vicious cycle.
It's true.
It's like the bigger a house you get, the more cats you can put in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a lot of cats and you have to get a bigger house.
Yes.
But then you have a bigger house and you can put more cats in it.
Exactly. My good thing is that this week I beat my father at fantasy football.
Oh, hell yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. I am not super into football, and he is very into fantasy football. So I have been needling him endlessly about it all week.
You beat him at his own game.
I really did. I think he's a little happy about it. I never thought I would, I'm going to be honest. What is everyone drinking tonight? I have tea because tea features heavily in this book, although I am drinking iced tea because it's warm today.
I am drinking a Monster energy drink out of a very nice reusable water bottle. Because I love reusable water bottles. I don't know. Get yourself one. This isn't a sponsorship, but get one.
Yeah. Brand non-specific water bottle.
Yeah, it has a brand, but I'm not saying it because they don't pay me.
Yeah.
I am drinking the finest of Astrasi boxed wines, imported directly from the deep. I thought about having some nice imported Astrasi tea, but it is too hot here, and I did not make iced tea in time.
Yeah, it's summer.
Yep.
Still is summer.
Yep.
And this is actually a book podcast. So has anyone read anything good lately? Although the obvious answer is Terms of Service, which we're about to talk about.
I recently finished MJ Kuhn's Among Thieves, and it was very good. I'm very looking forward to the sequel. Go read it.
Yeah, that has been on my TBR for an embarrassingly long time.
Really good.
Yes, it has been on the TBR for a long. We really should just make it a podcast book because then we know we'll read it.
It's the only way.
List is endless.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And there are only so many days in the year, tragically.
Yeah, we don't get a second year just for reading, unfortunately.
We should.
Yeah, we deserve it.
We do.
Or the first year could be for reading. That would be fine too.
Yeah, either
I
or,
wouldn't mind. All right, so Terms of Service. We struggled so much with how to phrase the genre of this book because some of it might be a spoiler. So,
yes, I did have a number of, as an author, when you're about to publish a book, you get a lot of, various editorial briefs, this is the, blurb that we're sending to X website that we're publishing an excerpt or a promotion on, or, this is, the marketing sheet we're giving out, or whatever. And there were a number of times where it was this is an interesting way to phrase the genre, but I understand why we're phrasing it that way. Please don't describe it some way else. And also, please remove this one word that you have in there that is a spoiler. I know that's a common genre, but remove it.
I think we landed on technology fae.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I advertised it as like space fae or something.
Yeah, okay.
So
I
you
feel,
use the word space.
I feel vindicated. Because
I use space fae because it's so obviously sci-fi ish, so I just slap space onto things that are kind of sci-fi because I think everyone's used to like space just being used as a general sci-fi prefix.
Well, and I think that's where I was coming from. Like I, at about maybe like 75 pages into the book, texted Lily going, "It's space fae, space fae."
Space fae. Well, because it's kind of like Star Wars, Star Trek, Stargate. People just kind of use star as like a preface for that kind of genre. So oftentimes we'll just use space as a preface for anything that's sci-fi, or specifically sci-fi that's not Earth-based.
Right.
Like, if you have a sci-fi that's set on Earth, people won't. If you have a sci-fi that's clearly not set on Earth, no matter where it's set, space is just kind of a common prefix. So I just use that because it's easy. Yeah, it's easy in marketing.
And aren't we all in space, if you think about it?
Yeah, that's true. We all are. Yeah. There's no not space.
Yes. Or if there is, that's a different book.
Yeah, that's true. That is a very different book that I don't have the technical knowledge to write. I would have to get a degree in like astrophysics first and still wouldn't understand it.
Speaking of, this book felt a little harder sci-fi, if you will, than your first novel, Bluebird, which was also sci-fi-y adjacent. And then, of course, Hunter's Gambit was a fantasy novel. So has your research process changed for this book at all?
Yes, I had to do a lot more research into various, like, God, I'm trying to avoid spoilering various types of like physics that I wouldn't get into. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that there are two groups of fae. One of them has various plant-based abilities, and the other has various like air and water-based abilities. So I did have to do a lot of research into, for example, food limitations if you're working exclusively with sort of space fantasy vegan. I had to do various research into at what point does, for example, like if you're working with air, at what point does it include like dust particles that aren't air that thus could not be part of this magic system. So there was a lot of research I had to do in terms of what the limitations of those abilities were. There was a lot of research I had to do in terms of writing a self-contained unit. So the Bastion, which is the setting, is fully self-contained. And so there was a lot of stuff where I never mentioned it in the book, but basically, in terms of food, Soylent Green. Yeah. I didn't mention it because, we all kind of know that that's probably what was going on, at least to some degree. But there was definitely an extent to which I had to do a lot of research into sort of like, how would air filtration work? How would like clothing work? Because obviously, it's probably either all recycled or all polyester or, made of various other like non-organic materials. So especially at the beginning of the book, one of the characters wears the same set of clothes for many, many days in a row before she gets a change of clothes, because it's kind of something that, like, she's like, man, I'm kind of gross. I need new clothes. But the clothes are kind of designed to be something you could wear for multiple days before you have to change, because you'd be really limited. There was research I had to do that I got scolded for. I initially put like concrete streets, like as I mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, the street was made of concrete. And I was at a retreat taught by Mary Robinette Kowal, and she was like, there would not be concrete. Get that out. No, not the materials being used here. No concrete. And I was like, yes, ma'am, understood. No concrete. So even at the very like late stages of editing the book, there were still tech mistakes that I made. And I'm sure there are some tech mistakes that are still in there. I am not a scientist, and it probably shows.
There was enough in there that I, also not a scientist, was fully on board.
Yeah, hell yeah, there we go.
So you mentioned the Bastion, which is the setting for this story. We follow Lucia, something or other.
I say it as Lucia, but
Lucia.
I mean, it's written down. I say Lucia, but you could probably mispronounce it any other way you want. Also that this isn't like Space America. The pronunciation for various words is going to be different accordingly.
Mhm.
I don't want to be like, if you have a British accent and you're pronouncing these words, go to jail. I mean, to be fair, a lot of the British do deserve jail, but not for mispronouncing reasons. Except when they say taco instead of taco, then they should go to jail. That part of the British accent legal.
Mhm. Luckily, there are no tacos in this book for us to run into that problem.
Yes, that does not come up as an issue.
So Lucia is a first responder. Her job is to deal with sort of the failing infrastructure of the Bastion and try to prevent disaster or deal with it once it's happened. And I thought it was so interesting how she's a very anxious person. That's very clear right away.
Messy, neurotic type of personality.
But you never describe that clinically. Like it's never, and she has a diagnosed anxiety disorder.
No.
Yeah.
I think that oftentimes does characters a disservice particularly if you introduce a character very clinically, because I think that, if you present a character with a diagnosis, readers are going to just jump to their stereotypes about that diagnosis. So, yeah, she's very anxious, and in my own head, I viewed her as kind of neurotic, but I don't think that she would probably be clinically described as that. And also, it's space fae. I don't think they have the same standards of like mental health and clinical diagnoses that we do. And also, frankly, the DSM-5 has issues. Let's be honest.
We can hope they've evolved past that by this point.
Yes.
I thought it was especially interesting how, I mean, so she's anxious, and that is displayed both with very overblown things, but also very reasonable things. So we kind of get to see her dealing with these in very similar ways, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, I have a lot of anxiety myself. I essentially describe it as I had my anxiety midlife crisis when I was 16. So for me, I'm well acquainted with how you can have a worry that's very reasonable, like I'm going to miss the train, and that can spike anxiety, and then very large scale abstract worries can also spark the same anxiety. And the like little ape brain in the back of your mind is like, these are equally insane, equally dangerous. Like, your anxiety for missing the train is going to be the same anxiety as like, what if your loved one is hit by a car? Like, your brain just fully goes into overdrive, no matter how reasonable or unreasonable the anxiety is. And that is definitely something that happens to Lucia, in that there are a lot of very reasonable fears about the Bastion. There's a lot of real structural degradation. There's a lot of like serious problems that can happen, and she's dealt with a lot of them. But the result of that is she kind of sees those potential problems everywhere, and as kind of happening constantly in a way that they're not quite.
But I mean, your hypervigilance saves your life once, and then it's like, well, I'm justified forever now.
Yep, exactly. It's the one time it saves you. You're like, well, I guess I got to rely on that constantly forever going forward.
One other thing about Lucia that I found really interesting, and I feel like I noticed it more partially because Lily and I had a discussion about kind of the opposite of this in one of the previous books that we covered, was Lucia's confidence and insistence that she is in fact just like the other girls. Like, she is not special. And it was so refreshing to see that in a character, because I feel like that is counter to what we see very frequently.
Yeah, I don't like the N-log movement attitude, shall we say. But I think it kind of comes back to Lucia's like anxieties and her worries. She's very aware that people are statistics, that even if there's only like a 10% chance something could happen to you, you are a statistic. You could be part of that 10%. So she doesn't view herself as any different from anybody else, because in the back of her head, she views people as statistics, even as she views them all as unique and important. She does not place certain people higher than others. I mean, obviously, she loves her family, all that type of stuff, but there's not an extent to which she weighs her life more heavily than she would weigh the life of like a random stranger.
And she was so strong in her principles too. Some of the other characters try to trip her up or catch her in a logic problem. Like, well, what if killing one person would save 100? And she just says, that's stupid. No. Which was excellent.
Yeah, there's a lot of internet debates about like, oh well, like what if Batman just started like murdering people all the time, and surely that would fix problems or like whatever. And you see a lot of internet debates about like, oh well, if Batman kills 10 people, then like this is, and it's like no, that you're getting into a really insane type of discussion. And so Lucia's whole mentality is just like, absolutely not. I'm not doing those bullshit hypotheticals. Human lives are human lives. End of story. This isn't like a little logic puzzle.
Yeah.
Not how this works.
So, going back to what you said about the Bastion earlier, something that I thought was fascinating, I guess I'm trained to expect dystopias when you get future sci-fi societies.
Yes, those are very common.
Yes.
Love them, but they are definitely very common.
And it did not seem, I mean, we don't see a ton of the inner political system of the Office of Administration, but it seemed overall that they're very concerned with sustainability because they have to be to keep, society running. And they seemed fairly reasonable, at least from the bits that we saw. And that was also very refreshing to read a book where, I don't know, the machine isn't trying to keep everyone down.
Yeah, when I was conceiving of how like the Bastion worked politically within like the human sections, I guess, which is most of it, there was sort of this view of it as kind of like sort of Star Trekky, but like the ideal of Star Trek, very like, we don't really have money, we don't really have like class stratification, everything is incredibly practical, kind of by necessity. And like, for example, there's a bit where Lucia mentions that, she lives in a like 1 unit house because she is a one person, and she would be assigned like a different house if she got like a partner and had kids or whatever. She would be like assigned to a different housing unit. So it would be solely based on, there are 3 people in this family unit, thus you need X amount of space, thus you will be in this building. So there's kind of that intense practicality and that sort of sense of like viewing things as sort of everything is a resource, right? I think in our current situation, we tend to view things that are resources as somehow different. Like, we all know food's a resource, right? But for example, there's literally a limited amount of helium in the world, but everyone's putting it in balloons anyway and like kind of wasting it because you want to like make your voice high. So it's not something we view as a resource because it's not something that we view as scarce. So when you live in a place where literally every single thing is scarce and is viewed as a resource, there's definitely a sort of almost brutalism to it, in that it's the bare bones of practicality by necessity.
Which is very different from the experiences she has after she meets the Astrosi, who are, as we said, the space fae.
Yes. And they are throwing all the kinds of parties you'd expect. Yeah, it was the switch from sort of restriction to indulgence. And Lucia's, I mean, she's not very judgmental, but she's a little judgmental about it in sort of the way that she doesn't really understand it. Like, it's so foreign to her. It's sort of like the wild partying and viewing things in abundance. There was a lot of stuff in the back of my head about like, types of fae tropes that you see a lot when I was writing this. And, one of the tropes is like, oh, you can't eat the food of the fae or else you're stuck there forever. And here it's like, no, it's not like poison or anything or like enchanted. It's just really good. If you spend your life eating like protein bars and then somebody's like, hey man, do you want this like fresh apple tart? You're going to be like, I can't, how do I go back? So it was kind of those sorts of mythology elements that ended up informing a lot of how the Estrosi work.
So, talking about these kinds of Fae tropes, it reminded us a little bit of Hunter's Gambit, where you kind of subvert classic vampire tropes in the sense that you take kind of like a step to the left. Like they're still recognizable as the trope, but you're just playing with it a little bit. And you definitely do that with Fae tropes, as you've talked a little bit about. Can you tell us a little bit more? Although this might end up being sort of spoilery, so maybe in a non-spoilery way.
I'll be very vague.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the Fae tropes that you play with?
Yeah, sure. So, kind of the main one that comes up is the idea of like, don't tell the Fae your real name. That comes up right at the start. Obviously, I deal with, don't eat the food of the Fae. There's also there's a lot of like verbal contracts and other sort of legal general, like, oh gosh, I'm struggling to avoid spoilers.
Yeah, this is a hard question, actually.
I know there's a lot of verbal contracts, there's a lot of like legalese, a lot of stuff like that, because you do see in Fae mythology a lot of kind of like, oh, when you bargain with the Fae, you never get exactly what you expect. It's based on like what's said literally rather than what's said figuratively, that kind of thing. You see a lot in mythology. So here there's a lot of contracts related stuff. I mean, it's literally called terms of service. And I did that because no one ever reads the terms of service. And this isn't a spoiler. This is like chapter 2 or 3 or something. Like when Lucia has to deal with her contract, she kind of spaces out because she's like, what the hell is all this legal shit? So she doesn't read the terms of service because nobody reads the terms of service.
I mean, she's understandably overwhelmed by what's going on.
Definitely.
Like, so understandable.
Oh yeah, it's really understandable why she's like zoning out and like what was that? What are they talking about? Hold on a sec. But that was definitely one of the reasons why I called it terms of service. Is once I realized that part of the plot was that she doesn't know the terms of her contract exactly because she didn't read the terms of service. I was like, well, I gotta call it terms of service because nobody reads the terms of service. Nobody reads them.
Immediately relatable.
Yeah, exactly.
If she had asked afterwards to read it over, would they have let her?
That's a good question. Oh God, I can't answer that without spoilering it.
Okay, we'll ask again. We'll ask again in a minute.
Yeah. There are ways you can access your contract. However,
spoiler.
Yeah. It was fascinating to me how the Estrosi spoke very casually. There were a lot of like double to be verbs, and they used ain't quite a bit, which felt very different from, I mean, the queen was very, regal and used antiquated language. And so that was sort of that contrast between what you expect a fairy to talk versus how most of them were speaking.
Yeah, when I created sort of the two Fae realms, I knew that there were a lot of ways in which I wanted Queen Seth and King Eri to stand out as old and, very like the oldest and wisest of their kind, etc., etc. And one of the things that I ended up settling on was giving them much more antiquated forms of language. Seth is more floral, Eri's a little more brutal, but they both do not use slang. A lot of the other Estrosi, it's ain't, it's y'all, it's in it, it's a lot of stuff like that. And it felt like a good character beat to exclude all of that from the king and queen's general syntax and general vocabulary. I mean, they're old. They gotta sound old, right?
It others them. They're even more othered than just being fairy.
Yeah. And one of the other reasons I did it is that there's a lot of elements where I wanted Lucia to seem kind of like a version of what Seth might once have been. Like, a lot of Lucia, you can see, like, if Lucia had gone down the same series of paths as Seth, she could have ended up in the same place. And Lucia also does not use much slang. Mm-hmm. She doesn't use a ton of casual phrases. She's generally a lot more precise in her speech. So I wanted that mirror as well.
Absolutely. Well, we've clearly run up against the spoiler wall.
I want to
So-
talk
Big
about
wall.
spoilers.
It's a big spoiler wall.
So before we keep going and dive into that part, Sarah, who should read this book?
I mean, space fae. Not if you are a space fae, you should read this book too. But if you like the concept of a sci-fi version of the fae that does something fresh and new, both from a mythology perspective, but also from a romantasy perspective, I think this is going to be a good book for you. And if you just like a survival sci-fi adventure set in a rundown megalopolis, like this is going to be great. You'll have a good time with this book.
I just note though, not that this book is romantasy.
No, this book
But if you've read a
No,
lot of
it's
fae
not.
romantasy and you're like, I'm looking for not this for the 5,000th time, then you'll like this
yeah,
book.
this book is not romantasy, but romantasy also tends to play with fae tropes.
Yeah.
And this does that in a different way.
Yeah, this is not like, no hate to Sarah J. Maas. This is not that.
And
This is a completely different flavor of like mythology, of fae, of fairy, of all of that. It's completely different. Slightly to the left
Yes.
in space.
Yes.
So if you're
Yes.
ready for that, if you're like, I have read 10,000 romantasy books this year, I need something different.
But I still want it to be fae.
Yeah. If you still want some of it, but you don't want the vibes of romantasy, but you still want a little bit of the elements of, the fairy mythology, then this might be the book for you.
This episode of Fiction Fans is brought to you by Fiction Fans.
That's us. We really appreciate our patrons because otherwise we fund this podcast entirely ourselves.
Patrons can find weekly bonus content, monthly exclusive episodes, and they have free access to our biannual zine, Solsticia.
You can find all of that and more at patreon.com/fictionfanspod. Thank you for all of your support.
The remainder of this episode contains spoilers. So, speaking of like romantasy tropes and Sarah J. Maas, but general romantasy too, I didn't think you would do this to me, but I was so worried that Lysander would turn out to be the asshole trainer love interest.
Yeah.
and not just stay an asshole. And I was so glad.
That I can say this with absolute certainty. At literally no point in the entire process of conceiving, writing, editing, and selling this book has that ever once occurred to me as a possibility until the moment you said it. That never even vaguely came up.
I didn't think he would do that to me, but that's such a trope in
It is.
like in these kinds of books, or in the romantasy kind of books, that I was worried. I was concerned.
No, now that you mention it, I'm like, in hindsight, I'm like, that makes sense as like a thing that could pop up because it is a trope. But that literally at no point ever occurred to me. It never popped into my brain.
It is interesting how fae mythology and fairies are, at this current cultural zeitgeist, so synonymous with romantasy. Like they are one and the same right now. Not that they are throughout all of time, but it's just you can't like totally get that out of your head when you're reading it.
Well, but also like the asshole trainer who turns into a love interest is not necessarily a fae romantasy thing specifically. Like you see that in Fourth Wing, for example.
It's a common like romance trope.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
No, that does not happen. It doesn't happen.
It absolutely does not happen, and I was so glad that he just stays a dick the entire time.
Yep, he just stays an asshole.
Yep.
He has, like redeeming qualities a little tiny bit. It's like 5%, and the other 95% is asshole.
And he gets away with so much.
He really does.
Queen Seth she kind of at the end acknowledges like, hey, maybe I should have given him a single consequence. It's like, yeah, maybe you should have.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense to which Seth's relationship with Annie and Lysander is messy and complicated. And even though she is a very just person in the sense of justice is blind, very like balancing the scales. There is an extent to which she, at least, as I was writing her and writing her actions, there is a slight extent to which she feels as though she owes Annie, and thus, by extension, kind of owes a little bit of leeway to Lysander. That, again, he does kind of he goes too far at the end. Like, he's very much, he does follow the letter of her law, not quite the spirit, and at the end, when he really goes against the letter of her law, is when it's like, nope, that is when the justice is blind, the scales need to be balanced. That is when that kicks in, and Seth is like, absolutely not. That was you directly disobeyed. This isn't something where I can be like, there's wiggle room. This is fully something where it's like, this was black and white.
Which is ironic in a sense, because if she had reined him in earlier, he might not have gotten to that point.
Yeah, it is, but it's again, it's one of those things where I have characters throughout the book, I think, say this, where Seth isn't cruel, she's just heartless. So she has, I mean, literally, as we find out, but she isn't actively trying to make anyone's lives harder. She's actively trying to make their lives better. She's just not lovey-dovey about it. She doesn't know how to be. So with Lysander, there's definitely that extent to which she is trying to make him happy and fulfilled in life in a way that, like a rational human who's maybe been to therapy would not think is a good solution at all. But to them and to Seth, the way she kind of gives Lysander some free rein is definitely a way in which her heartlessness expresses itself. And again, it really is, she's not cruel. She is just heartless.
Not ruthless.
She's not ruthless.
It's not a pejorative. It's just a descriptive.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like so often, there's the like cruel, evil queen trope. And it's like Seth has a tiny bit of that, but it's not malicious. It's like, it's kind of its own version of brutalism, different from how the Bastion is, but it's sort of its own version of practicality. It's its own black and white.
All of the Astrasi become Astrasi due to some kind of trauma, and they don't go to therapy. They just turn into these, immortal beings.
Yeah, so. And then they do a lot of weed.
Yeah.
If they're in the deep, it's so much weed. If they're in the mists, I honestly was not able to figure out exactly what they're smoking, but there's a lot of vaping going on.
Yeah, so they, instead of doing therapy, they just do a lot of drugs.
Yep, so many drugs. Straight up just having a good time.
Okay, so now that we're in the spoiler section, I do want to circle back to the question about if Lucia had asked for her contract, would they have let her read it?
I think they would. Oh God, that is such a difficult question, because I don't think it ever occurred to Lucia to read her contract.
Probably not.
I don't think it would have been something she'd have thought of. I think they probably would have said like, oh, well, there's nothing prohibiting you from reading your contract. But I don't think they would have like held her hand and walked her to where it is and explained how to access it. Like, I think they would have just been like, well, it's not illegal.
If you find it, you can read it. We're not going to stop you, but we're not going to help you.
Yeah, like I think that's probably how it would have gone down.
Oh man, she is absolutely thrown to the wolves in the sense of like social norms and rules with the Astrasi. That hit my anxiety every time she's trying to operate within their culture and she's just like flailing and doesn't know what their norms are. I was like, no, stop. What are you doing? Ah!
Yeah, she is, her personality type is extremely at odds with the personality types of the average Astrasi. Ironically, again, she's closer to Seth than she is to most of the others personality-wise, even though, Seth as queen is, you would think, is like, she exemplifies everything that the Astrasi are, and she does not. And so Lucia is closer in personality to Seth than she is to most of the others. Except she obviously doesn't understand the wordsmithing of the Astrasi that Seth very clearly has mastered.
And no one explains it to her. Lysander, of course not, because he likes to see her struggle.
an asshole.
It amused me to no end that, like it never occurred to Lucia to ask to see her contract, it never occurred to her to sit down and ask Annie, like, so what's their deal?
Yeah, no. She misses, I think, what we would view as obvious because she's so overwhelmed in every, all her senses are overwhelmed. Her mind's overwhelmed that she never has the opportunity to get any perspective and to think about things in the same way that like an onlooker would think of. So a lot of this stuff just does not occur to her. She's too busy dealing with other types of anxiety and things that she views as more practical and immediate threats, but they're more external threats. They're not interpersonal issues. Those just don't come up to her as much.
Speaking of things that didn't come up to her, the tension that I felt as the reader of waiting for her to realize that time was passing differently in the Bastion versus the Deep. Like, she doesn't think about it. There are hints left in the text and in dialogue that she has, but she doesn't recognize it. But anyone who knows anything about like Fey tropes is like,
yes,
this is coming. And I was waiting for like that full first half of the book for her to realize, like, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah, that was something where I knew that people who were well acquainted with Fey myths would pick up on it. And I knew that all I really had to do was leave a couple of like little bits of foreshadowing. I knew that if I laid it on heavy, the readers would not be happy with it. But yeah, I was having a good time writing those bits of foreshadowing. But if you don't know Fey tropes, that would not occur to you as a thing that's happening. And Lucia does not know Fey tropes by virtue of not existing in a world where there's Fey mythology as we know of it. And to the Astrosi, they're immortal, they're unchanging, so it doesn't affect them. It literally doesn't. So it's not something that they would like think of mentioning. Like the only person who mentions it even slightly is Annie, and she doesn't like she is unwilling to tell Lucia outright. Like I think Annie's line is just like, I briefly went back to the Bastion, but it wasn't my Bastion. And that's kind of like, yeah, because a shit ton of time had passed so it really was not the city she left. But a reader who knows these tropes might pick up on that. Lucia does not know these tropes and is too busy concerned with things that she thinks are more immediate, even though they are not. Yeah, it was fun to write. And that was something I knew that was going to happen very early on. Again, don't eat the food of the Fae, don't give the Fae your real name. I was like, yep, time is going to pass differently there. That is how the trope works, and it is so good every time.
And then we even got some of the classic imagery, right? Queen Seph's bower is like under a hill that has a tree on it, which is very classic fairy.
Yes.
That was delightful.
Yeah, I was having such a good time writing stuff like that because I'm a very visual writer. I'm also an artist. For those listeners that haven't heard me be like, "Oh, I'm also an artist" all the time. I'm also an artist, so I visualize a lot of scenes before I write them. And I know there are a lot of authors who work differently, where they think of like the interiority and how that would be written out before they think of the visuals. But for me, I always think of the visuals first. So coming up with these ways of bringing in, like the bower, Seph's bower, bringing that into sci-fi was very fun for me.
Okay, really so quick, I have a stupid question. I know you're about to ask a good one, but I have a stupid one. Very early on, speaking of hints, very early on, there's the icosahedron, which I had to look up and I'm embarrassed about. It's a D20.
It is a D20.
Is it just a total red herring or did I miss something?
It's a total red herring.
Okay,
it's
great.
a total red herring. It is just one of those pieces of like Era 1 bric-a-brac, and it being a D20 is because it's a D20, and that's just me throwing in a little bit of fun. Yeah, no, that is fully a red herring. It's just something that Carrion briefly thinks like might be the diamond because they're like, man, it literally there's so much Era 1 trash like littering around the place. It's kind of like like those European countries that still have like landmines from World War II that are unexploded, and you're kind of just like, yeah, sometimes they just show up and like a bomb squad has to be called in to deal with it. That's kind of how a lot of like Era 1 bric-a-brac is treated.
All right, Sarah, you can ask your good question now.
I mean, I don't know if it's really a good question, and it's not relevant to the story at all, really, but it's something that I was wondering as I was reading it. Do you know how the first Astrosi were created from the terraformers, or is that something where you figured, I knew they were, I don't know how, I don't need to know the details?
Yes, so basically when the terraforming ship, hi, we're in spoiler territory. When the
It's a
terraforming
spaceship.
ship,
Ah!
yeah, like when it crashed in my mind, so the way you become Astrosi is you basically have part of the terraforming device in your body. And the way the Astrosi do it is they generally replace something, like an organ or part of your skin or something like that. And in my head, how the first ones were created is they happened to be just like average workers near those terraforming devices when the ship crashed. They were damaged in the crash and kind of just like splash damage, essentially terraforming splash damage, and that healed the injuries that they had sustained during the crash. And then they were like, hey, we could fix some people with this, and then it went terribly from there on out. So that in my head is how the first Astrosi came to be, but that's not actually inherently, that's not anything the reader needs to know.
Yeah,
Not
I
at
mean,
all.
it's not relevant to the story at all.
Yeah, it's not relevant, and it was something where I never really found a good place to like sprinkle it in, because as a writer you have so much lore in your head, but you never want to be like, anyway, hello reader, welcome to 5 pages of me explaining things that happened like forever ago that aren't relevant now.
Was there anything else that you, like any other cool idea that you had that you wanted to include but just couldn't find a good place for?
Yes, I really wanted to include more of what happened to the original crew, like the original, not like the C-suite, but like the command crew of the ship. We see a little bit of that. We see like a picture and like the remnants of like an office plaque. We see a bit of that, and I kind of wanted to include more about it, but I was just like, this isn't useful. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It would just be a few pages of me being like, here's what I, the author, have thought of that isn't important, but here you go.
Hey, isn't it neat?
Yeah, exactly. For all that I love Lord of the Rings, I don't write the Silmarillion,
Mhm.
and the Silmarillion is, hey, here's all the shit that wasn't in the book. It's literally a Bible. I actively try not to include any of that in my book because there's only one person who can do the Silmarillion, and it's not me.
And to be fair, the Silmarillion is not in The Lord of the Rings.
No, it is also not, even though, let me tell you, a lot of the Lord of the Rings has like, by the way, let me explain some things. Except oftentimes it's like, and then Tolkien decided to spend a page talking about how pretty a tree is. And we love that for him. Apparently he was like that in real life. So good for him. He was consistent.
Speaking of trope subversions and becoming Astrosi, our main character, Lucia, goes through her crisis of finding out that she has outlived all of her relatives. And we time skip a little bit, find out that she has her heart replaced and becomes heartless, similar to Queen Seth. And then later she has the opportunity to take her heart back, and she chooses not to, which was a fascinating journey. I think we're so primed to expect and then they fix it and everything's better, quote unquote, better resolution from
Yeah.
heroes.
Yeah, no, I think there probably was in my head early on some version of things where Lucia takes her heart back. But the more I wrote it, the more I realized that she just wouldn't. Like her original anxiety would be sort of too much. Like she would have too many worries about like, why did I give up my heart? Like why did I bargain this away? And in the end she kind of is like, I can't second guess past me constantly, or else like I'll just be in a loop forever. So she ends up not getting her heart back, and just kind of being like, yeah, this is who I am now. I can't go backwards. I don't want to go backwards. I don't want to know what I gave up. And I think we don't see that as often, but it felt very true to her character, and it felt more true to the story as a whole. Because like you said, so much of it is subversion and a different way of doing like a Faye story. And I feel like if I had had her take her heart back, it would have been less of a subversion than I wanted it to. It would have felt more fairy tale than I was writing. And again, it just didn't make sense for her character. It felt like better character growth for her to not take her heart back.
It's really genuine change instead of regression in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've used this in some marketing graphics and stuff, but one of the descriptions for the book is the ship of Theseus, but with people. And, that's kind of part of it. Like, she can't take back the original part of her body ship. Like, it's gone. She's moving on. She's something different now. So, yeah, it was necessary for her to not take it back. And I think if I had made it so that she takes her heart back, it would have weakened the story as a whole and weakened her character.
Well, and it's less, I'm going to say less realistic. I know we're talking about fairies, but hear me out.
What? You're telling me fairies aren't realistic? That's crazy.
Well, people do go through traumatic events that change them, and you can't go back and undo that. But you can, like, make peace with who you are now and move forward. And so it feels a lot better in that way. Like, just to have her say, like, no, this is who I am, and I'm okay with it, instead of, like, constantly trying to fix herself.
Yeah, like, the sort of undoing of what you've been through, I think, can work with some narratives, but did not work for this one. A lot of this is very, like, you cannot undo your actions. You can't take back what's been said. You can't undo a contract. Like, once something happens to you, you have to go forward with that as it is. And yeah, no, it is something where, trauma does change you. And, oftentimes when you've been through something that really hurts, you want to be like, if only I could go back in time by a week. If only I could go back in time by a month, then surely things would turn out differently. And, we can't time travel. That isn't what happens to people. You heal and you move on, but you can't, go into your brain and, like, dig out the piece of you that was hurt, or dig out, the trauma itself. That's not how people work. That's not how life works.
So Lysander, thank goodness, is not the love interest.
No, he is not, thank God.
However, we do get some delightful tension between Lucia and then as she becomes Astrozzi and becomes Cyan, her second sort of persona. Or not persona, second self, maybe?
Yeah, it's the Fae take your name.
Yes.
So as Astrozzi, she is Cyan. She is not Lucia. She has to get that new name, new self.
But as both selves, she has some great tension with Carrion, who is kind of the antagonist throughout the book, but then also secretly the good guy all along.
Yeah, they are the good guy in the absence of better choices. They don't do good things, and they're definitely kind of fucked up. But
but they are trying to save the world. I feel like that gets you automatic good guy privileges.
It gets you a little bit of leeway, yeah. They're just very bad at it.
Yeah. So there's some tension there, and then at the very end they do kind of have they care very much about each other by that point. They've been through quite a bit together. And so while there is, in that sense, some romance in this book, you use a very light hand throughout the story. And I think that also is refreshing in a way. Like, not every story needs to be like about the love that conquers all, even if I did like it.
I think the way I was sort of writing it, so if you've read Pride and Prejudice, there's so many bits where Lizzie is just like, yeah, this guy just kind of hates me and he's not interested at all. But if you read it in hindsight, you could totally see all the bits where Darcy is in the background like, oh my God, she's the perfect woman. I don't know what to do. And Lizzie's just completely oblivious to it. And in my head, when I was writing this, there's an element to that with Carrion where they are much more interested in Lucia than she is consciously aware of. She's very much so like, they are an antagonist. They are here to do bad things. And Carrion is like, damn, you're fascinating, girl. Holy shit. What's going on with you? You freelater today? And she's just like, yeah, they're doing that just because I am in their way and they wish to stop me. And that is exclusively it, which is obviously not the case. But it was definitely something where I was writing it as like they're much more into her from the beginning, and not necessarily into in a sexual way or a romantic way or anything like that, but into in sort of a, there's something fascinating going on inside your brain and I want to figure out what it is and how it works. And Lucia is not aware of that in the way that perhaps a reader in hindsight might be, because again, the story is told from her point of view. The reader sees what she sees.
I mean, I do think as the reader, it's pretty obvious that Carrion finds her fascinating. Again, like you say, not necessarily in a romantic way initially, but just in a, you think differently from anyone I've interacted with, so far. So I do think that comes through, even if Lucia does not consciously recognize it.
Yeah, she does not.
I mean, they leave breadcrumbs, right? They're actively not taunting her, but kind of trying to entice her.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. In the beginning, they are very much the White Rabbit to her Alice in Wonderland, and that kind of continues in many ways. Except it is, it's a little fucked up.
I mean, it's probably for the best for their relationship that she as Zian doesn't remember anything that happened.
Yeah, there's a bit where she and Carrion are talking, and Carrion's like, a better person would tell you what I did to you, but I'm not a better person, so I'm not gonna.
She has the option
Yeah.
to learn it all. She chooses not
And
to.
she chooses not to.
Carrion respects that.
Yeah, no, they they fully respect the decision she makes, and they would have if she decided to keep her heart as well. But yeah, they aren't going to tell her ever.
And the fact that that benefits them is just gravy.
Yeah, they're not a better person. They are not the better person.
But they are better than Lysander, so.
Yeah, but that's such a low bar. The bar's low, but yes, they are better than Lysander.
So the ending of this book is quite open-ended. Was that always the case, or did you ever have a version where the end was more concrete, except didn't include concrete, as we have talked about?
Yes, no concrete. There was a version where Carrion dies permanently, and it was more Lucia as then Zian being forced to take up their mantle and carry on. And I ended up not doing that because I was like, nah, I don't want to kill them.
Despite the really good pun you just made.
Yeah, I know. But so that was a potential version. There was also a potential idea ending of like doing like a time skip epilogue where we find out more about how the terraforming has happened. But then I was like, I don't like that. Also, the book was getting long enough as it was, so that was definitely out just for economy of words. But I felt like the open-ended ending was a good way to end a book where so much of the world building and plot revolves around the characters not actually knowing how the world works. I thought that giving too many concrete answers at the end wouldn't fit in as well thematically with the overall lack of knowledge of, what lies beyond.
So don't tell us, but do you know then what they see when those doors open and they find out like what happens?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, eventually the planet gets terraformed.
Yeah.
Eventually the Ostrosi die out because they can't make any more Ostrosi. And, even though they are functionally immortal, things can still kill them. So, eventually the planet becomes fully terraformed and habitable, and eventually the Ostrosi are all gone. But that's so far down the line. Probably when they open the door, they see exactly what was left behind, because terraforming doesn't work instantly.
Yeah.
It's not that fast.
For all of the mystery at the end, it still definitely felt optimistic. Like,
yeah,
our heroes have accomplished their goal. Like, they are successful. And now it's just a matter of seeing what that actually means.
Yeah, I think that was, again, one of the reasons why I decided not to end it with Carrion dying, is because I didn't want to end it on a depressing note. There's a lot of depressing shit in this book. I didn't want to end it on a sad note, too.
Yeah.
I wanted to end it with a little spark of hope. You're going into the unknown, but it's not all fear.
I mean, even when you think, like, yeah, Lucia does outlive her family, but her family, like, lives long and prospers.
Yeah, no, they
She
don't,
just
like,
wasn't
die
there for it.
tragically.
Yeah.
She missed it, but it's not like, oh, she was gone and then they were all killed by an axe murderer or whatever. Like, They live out long, happy lives.
I mean, it's a tragedy for her. It's not necessarily a tragedy for them in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they would go through the tragedy of losing a family member that they care about, but they wouldn't be going through the same degree of abandonment tragedy that she does.
Yeah.
Well, I think that about wraps up what we have for you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a delight. Loved the book.
To hear it.
Can't wait to hear what crazy thing you have for us next.
So tentatively, I'm still in the process of pitching it to my agent, even though she sounds enthusiastic. Potentially a lit RPG.
Oh.
I love video games. I love lit RPGs. I have been a fan of them for easily over a decade, except mostly it's been manga and manhwa and light novels and anime and stuff. It's only very recently come to the West. So I'm like, yes, let me write a lit RPG. I love them. I love video games. I play them a completely normal amount. Yeah, so a lit RPG, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
That's exciting. And I am still living in hope for a sequel to The Hunter's Gambit. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm living in hope still.
So hypothetically, if I got offered a chance to do a sequel to Hunter's Gambit, but it wouldn't be a thing what I have planned in my head, I would just not do it. I would just not take that deal, because for me it's more important to treat the work as I think it should be treated and do what I think is best for the world and the characters and the narrative than it is for me to just produce a sequel. So
that's absolutely valid. I respect that. And I hope that you get the opportunity to write the sequel that you want.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten a lot of comments from people about, hoping for a sequel someday.
I mean, it's a standalone book. It doesn't need a sequel. I just want one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do too, right? I love vampires. Let me write more vampires. Come on. Come on, man.
Well, is this book out? I should have looked that up before we started recording.
This book comes out on the 23rd of September, so we are recording on the 17th, which means it comes out next week. But for listeners, it's presumably already out. Go buy it.
It came out yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, it came out yesterday, guys. We're reporting from the future. It came out yesterday. Go purchase it. It's available anywhere books are sold, including the internet.
Yes.
Which is where most books are sold these days.
Yeah. And if someone wants to follow you for updates on maybe future projects or whatever you're doing, can you plug your website, social handles?
Yes, I am on Blue Sky at Ciel Pierlot, which is, I'm very, very basic. My name is all my handles. I'm at Blue Sky. I predominantly post more businessy stuff there. So announcements, for example. I'm also on Instagram, also at Ciel Pierlot. I post a lot more promotional stuff there. I post more stuff about my own life there, the occasional story. So Instagram is a better place to find me if you want more personal stuff, more cool, pretty pictures. Blue Sky is a better place to find me if you just want the business highlights. And then I have my website, which is also convenient enough, cielpierlot.com. And mostly what I have there is summaries of my work, where you can find my work, reviews, that sort of thing. That is where I am. That is what is there.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
This has been, as always, a pleasure.
Yeah, I always love coming on your guys' podcast. Thank you for having me, and hopefully I'll be back.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Blue Sky and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com or leave a comment on YouTube.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find exclusive episodes and a lot of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated.
Bye.